They laughed when she stepped onto the Navy SEAL training field, a female Navy SEAL candidate. Not a chance. But what she proved next would redefine what true strength looks like inside one of the world's toughest military programs. This isn't just a story about survival. It's about a woman who broke through the impossible to become the first of her kind. A story of grit, respect, and silent power. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments where in the world are you watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. Because this journey into what it truly means to be a female Navy SEAL is far from over. At the Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, California, home to one of the most brutal military training programs in the world, a single name caused quiet whispers among the recruits: Ava Morgan. She was one of the first women ever to be accepted into BUDS, the grueling 24-week basic underwater demolition shock SEAL course, designed to break even the toughest men. Mud, surf torture, drown-proofing, log PT, and Hell Week. This wasn't just training. It was designed to destroy you. And if it didn't, you might just earn the right to try out for the SEAL teams. But Ava wasn't treated like the others. From the moment she stepped onto the grinder, eyes followed her not out of admiration, but doubt. Some fellow candidates muttered under their breath, others avoided eye contact, and the instructors most looked through her, especially Senior Chief Petty Officer Matthew Cole, a legendary SEAL operator with over 15 years of combat experience. To him, Ava was a distraction, a PR stunt, dead weight. And yet, she showed up every day, quiet, steady, refusing to quit. Because Ava didn't come here to be accepted. She came to change the definition of strength, even if the world wasn't ready for it. By the time Hell Week arrived, the 5th week of BUDS, nearly half the original class of 160 candidates had rung the bell. Literally. The brass bell stood at the center of the compound, gleaming under the California sun, and every time a recruit gave up, they rang it 3 times. It echoed like a funeral, a goodbye to the dream of becoming a Navy SEAL. Ava Morgan had made it further than anyone expected. But expectations didn't mean much here, especially not to Senior Chief Cole, who watched her every move like a ticking time bomb. To him, she was a PR experiment waiting to collapse. He didn't scream at her more than the others, but he didn't hide his skepticism either. "She won't make it through Hell Week," he muttered to another instructor. "That kind doesn't—" Hell Week was designed to destroy human limits. 5.5 days with just 4 hours of sleep, surf torture, log PT, boat carries, hypothermia, mental warfare. Ava's squad was pushed into the freezing Pacific at 2 a.m. Forced to link arms and lie in the surf, waves crashing over their faces as instructors shouted, "Quit now! The water doesn't care who you are!" One by one, recruits broke. The cold seeped through bone, and the voices in their heads got louder than the commands outside. Ava stayed, even when her lips turned purple, even when her body trembled uncontrollably, even when one of the men beside her barked. "You're slowing us down? Just ring the damn bell." She didn't flinch. Not then. But the moment that almost broke her came hours later. It was 6 a.m. on day 4. The squad was ordered to carry a rubber boat over their heads across 4 miles of sand. Ava, placed at the front corner, struggled to hold the weight. Her shoulders burned, her knees buckled. The boat dropped slightly, and the entire squad felt the shift. Cole was there instantly. "You just cost your team 5 penalty sprints. Morgan." She gritted her teeth. "I can take it." "That's not the point. They can't." He turned to the team. "You want her on your boat, crew. Speak now." Silence. No one defended her. Cole's eyes said everything: "They don't trust you, and neither do I." Later that night, soaked to the skin, and shivering from the last surf immersion. Ava sat alone in the mud. Everyone else huddled in groups, conserving heat. She had no such circle. Her fingers bled from rope pulls, her thighs cramped with every shift. And in that moment, her mind whispered the words she had promised never to hear. Maybe this really isn't for you. Then something happened. A candidate from another crew collapsed severe dehydration, unresponsive. Medics rushed in. The squad froze, time slowed. Ava moved. She ripped off her soaked top, wrapped it around his neck to stabilize his head, and used her remaining energy to elevate his legs and clear his airway, all within seconds. Controlled, calm, exact. The instructors watched in stunned silence. Cole approached as the medics took over. "Where'd you learn that?" "Paramedic school. 3 years on ambulance runs before this." Cole stared. She didn't say it with pride, just fact. He nodded once, and for the first time, not with dismissal. The next morning, something had changed. She wasn't put in the back of the line. She was placed in the center. During a swim drill, Cole called out, "Morgan, you lead the recovery scenario. Let's see if you're more than muscle." And she did. She orchestrated a flawless extraction underwater, guiding 2 panicking recruits to safety in the combat pool. She didn't shout. She didn't bark orders. She led through control, through calm and chaos. By the final night of Hell Week, 43 candidates remained. Ava was one of them. And Senior Chief Cole, once her harshest critic, didn't wait until the end to speak. He addressed the team, voice gravelly and commanding. "There's a lot of noise about standards, about tradition. But let me be clear, this program doesn't care what you look like. It cares what you do under fire." He turned his head toward Ava just for a moment. Morgan didn't just survive Hell Week. She made this team better. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was earned. Ava didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just stood mud-smeared, broken in body but iron in will, and took her place among the few still standing. Not as a woman, not as a symbol, but as a future SEAL after surviving Hell Week. Ava Morgan became a ghost of her former self, physically depleted but sharper than ever mentally. Most candidates who made it this far had gained the instructor's respect. But Ava, she still felt the tension. Like every success she had was being measured against the question no one dared say aloud. But can she really lead? Senior Chief Cole had gone quiet. Not supportive. Not skeptical. Just watching. That silence spoke volumes. Then came an opportunity no simulation could replicate. The SEAL candidates were transported to San Clemente Island for final phase field exercises, a series of intense days-long missions meant to replicate combat conditions. Long hikes, weapon handling, target recon, high-pressure strategy, all in terrain built to punish. But one night, a real emergency unfolded. A training detachment returning from a solo nav drill radioed in 2 men missing. The island terrain was treacherous. Jagged cliffs, dense underbrush, and hidden drop-offs. With visibility near zero and radio comms patchy, the instructors called for an emergency recovery detail. The instructors usually handled this themselves. But something about this moment felt orchestrated. Cole stepped forward, his voice steady. "Squad Delta, on me. Morgan, you're leading the field response." Everyone froze. "Even Ava?" "Sir," she asked, not out of doubt but disbelief. Cole met her eyes. "You've been waiting for someone to let you prove it. Here's your moment. Don't waste it." The team of 8 strapped up in full gear. Ava gathered intel quickly, last known coordinates, weather shifts, terrain hazards. While others were still blinking, she was drawing a search grid in the dirt with a knife. "We split into pairs and triangulate the canyon route. Move low. Minimal light. Look for broken foliage, Boot drag, heat signature. We stay within 100 yards of line of sight. Radios on pulse, not chatter. We move in 10. No one argued. The woman they once doubted now had command presence. Quiet, calculated, certain. 2 hours into the mission, wind whipped dust into their faces and fog rolled thick across the ridgelines. One team slipped off route, another lost signal. But Ava kept her focus. She spotted faint drag marks on a steep incline. Following her instincts and training, she slid down, anchoring herself with a rope line and calling in via coded clicks. And then she saw him. Candidate Torres, half buried under loose rock, leg visibly fractured, semi-conscious, dehydrated. "I'm here," she said, kneeling beside him. "You're not alone." He mumbled something about the second guy, Simpson, still unaccounted for. Ava didn't panic. She radioed in the find, requested med-evac, and made the call that shocked everyone. She handed field control to Lucas, a steady teammate, and chose to go deeper alone to find Simpson. "Negative," Lucas warned. "You don't go solo. If I don't, he dies before sunrise." Cole, listening from command post, didn't interfere. He knew this was the moment, not just for Ava, for everyone watching. The canyon narrowed. Ava followed the slope downward, using only moonlight and instinct. She moved like a shadow boots soft against the rocks, ears tuned for the slightest sound. Then faint breathing. Simpson was wedged between two boulders, unconscious but alive, disoriented, bleeding from the head. Ava checked his airway. Stable, pupils reactive, but extraction impossible unless she had help. So she improvised. Using a scarf, 2 carabiners, and a field tourniquet strap, she fashioned a head support sling. Then she stabilized his leg with her own pack frame and slowly pulled him back up the slope inch by painful inch. Each step cost her. Each breath felt heavier than the last. But she didn't stop. Because this was no longer about passing. It was about refusing to leave anyone behind. She reached the ridge just as the med team arrived. Cole stood there, arms folded, silent. As the corpsman took over, Ava collapsed to her knees, coated in blood, dirt, and adrenaline. Cole knelt beside her. "You broke every rule in the manual." "Had to." He had minutes. A pause. Then he said something no one expected. "I'd follow you into fire." Morgan. Word spread like wildfire. Not because she succeeded, but because of how she led. Decisively, selflessly, without bravado. She didn't shout her value. She showed it. And in doing so, she earned something that couldn't be taught. Trust. After the rescue operation on San Clemente Island, the base returned to normal operations, but the air had shifted. There was no ceremony, no dramatic announcement. Just silence. A new kind of silence. Where once Ava Morgan was ignored or doubted, now she was observed closely, carefully. The recruits who used to question her place in Buds now watched the way she moved through each exercise, the way she made no excuses, the way she never asked for credit. Something had changed in them. But the biggest shift wasn't in her fellow candidates. It was in Senior Chief Petty Officer Cole. For the first time, he began coaching her, not testing her. In a swim evolution, he offered a quiet correction on current drift. During weapons drills, he gave pointers instead of barking criticisms. And one afternoon, after a brutal ruck march under the blazing sun, he handed her a cold canteen, unprompted. She raised an eyebrow. "You sure it's not a trap, Chief? Don't flatter yourself." He grunted, then added, "You earned a water break. That's all." But that wasn't all. He had stopped treating her like a statement and started seeing her as a SEAL in the making. During a leadership evaluation exercise, where candidates had to plan and execute a simulated hostage rescue, Ava was chosen to co-lead. Not by instructors, By the team. Lucas approached her the night before the drill. You've already led when it counted. This time, it's just a simulation. We trust you. She didn't reply immediately. She looked around at the men who once doubted her, who once hoped she'd ring out. Now, they stood with her not out of charity, but out of conviction. That night, around the fire pit, someone asked her, "Why didn't you ever give up, even when no one believed in you?" She stared into the flames for a long time. "Because I never came here to prove them wrong." A pause. "I came here to prove me right." The simulation the next day was brutally complex, multi-location, moving targets, live comms jamming. The kind of scenario that exposes cracks in leadership. Ava's crew didn't just succeed. They were the only unit to complete all objectives without any casualties or critical errors. When the debrief came, the senior instructor on duty looked over the report and raised an eyebrow. "Which of you made the call to flank north and intercept early?" Lucas gestured toward Ava. She did. No one corrected him. Because it wasn't a challenge, it was respect. Later that week, Cole approached her during chow, dropping a folded piece of paper on her tray. "Don't say I never gave you anything." Inside was a printed notice. Recommendation for Officer Candidate School SEAL Track. Ava blinked. "I didn't apply for this." Cole sat across from her, uncharacteristically calm. "You didn't have to." He leaned forward. "Listen, Morgan, you've got more than grit. You've got the kind of brain that sees angles no one else notices. You don't command with your voice. You command with your presence. That's rare. We need officers like that, SEALs like that." Her hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what this meant. A woman who had once been told she didn't belong now had a path toward leading SEAL teams. The final change came not with words, but with action. During a land navigation course, a new female candidate joined as part of a trial program. She was younger, nervous, isolated. The men watched as she fumbled with her compass, unsure if she should ask for help. Ava didn't wait. She walked over, knelt beside her, and said, "You don't have to prove you're strong. You just have to keep showing up." The girl smiled, nodded, and got back to work. Cole saw the moment from a distance. He didn't interfere. He just smiled for real this time. By the time graduation approached, no one whispered about Ava anymore. They spoke her name with something else entirely. Pride. Not because she changed for the system, but because she changed the system without ever bending who she was. And now, she wasn't just going to earn her trident. She was going to wear it with a mission much greater than her own. The final week of Buddhas was quiet. There were no dramatic speeches, no celebratory events, just the cold, calculated efficiency the Navy had always operated with. Candidates were processed, briefed, and readied for the final swim qualification, the last gate before earning the coveted SEAL trident. Ava Morgan stood in line among the final 34. From the original 160, only a fraction remained. Her hair was matted beneath her dive hood. Her muscles ached. Her hands were blistered from weeks of friction against ropes, weapons, rocks, and paddles. And yet, in that moment, she felt unshakably whole. Senior Chief Cole stood by the shoreline, clipboard in hand. He gave her a nod. Not formal, not forced, but one that said, "You made it." The 5.5-mile ocean swim was a silent gauntlet. Cold waves, mental fatigue, threat of hypothermia. Ava finished third, quietly pulling herself onto the dock, collapsing on her back, staring at the sky as if seeing it for the first time. By week's end, she was no longer the female candidate. She was SEAL Candidate Morgan, and she had earned her trident. But just as the dust settled, the call came. It wasn't from her commanding officer. It came directly from Naval Special Warfare Command. She was summoned to a briefing room 2 days before official graduation. Inside sat 3 senior officers, all wearing unmarked uniforms. A fourth stood in the corner, hands clasped behind his back, his insignia identifying him as a SEAL Team 6 operator. Ava saluted, then sat. "Morgan," the lead officer said, "you've drawn a lot of attention. Not just for surviving buds, but for how you did it." He slid a file across the table. Inside was a classified mission summary: rural terrain, international extraction, high risk, covert ops. "We want you to join a rapid deployment shadow team. It's an experimental unit, blending unconventional leadership with tactical precision." Ava narrowed her eyes. "Why me?" The officer didn't flinch. "Because you led when you weren't supposed to. You earned loyalty without rank. And you bring something we've been missing for a long time: instinct without ego. We need that, now more than ever." It wasn't a command, it was a choice. She could complete her assignment as a junior SEAL, take the usual path, and quietly make history. Or she could take a different one, unwritten, dangerous, and unforgivingly public, whether she wanted it to be or not. That night, she sat alone on the beach with her trident clutched in her palm. She didn't ask herself, "Am I ready?" She asked, "If not me, then who?" She accepted the assignment. And what followed was something even Ava couldn't have imagined. Her first mission with the Shadow Unit was a deployment to Eastern Africa, coordinating a multinational recovery of medical aid workers taken hostage. Intelligence was scarce, the terrain was hostile, language barriers, cultural tensions, and political friction made everything worse. But Ava didn't just function, she excelled. Where others hesitated, she listened. Where others saw chaos, she saw patterns. And when their team leader was injured in an IED detonation, Ava stepped in without hesitation, not to take command, but to hold the team together. The mission succeeded. All hostages rescued, no SEALs lost. When the unit returned to base, the after-action reports praised her leadership. But it was a note handwritten by a young African interpreter that stayed with her. "You are not what we expected. You are what we needed." Months later, when Ava finally returned to Coronado to attend the next Bud's graduation as a guest, she wore no rank markings, no spotlight followed her. But as she walked through the grinder yard, a new class of candidates, this time with 4 women among them, stood a little taller, and every instructor, even the ones who once questioned her, saluted as she passed. Senior Chief Cole met her at the edge of the compound. "You took the road no one marked." "That's how new maps get drawn," she replied. He grinned. "We just got orders to name the new leadership barracks." He handed her a slip of paper. "Morgan Hall." Ava stared at it. For a moment, her hands trembled, and then she whispered more to herself than anyone. "Let the next one know. She never walks in alone." The sound of boots on wet sand had become familiar. But this time, it wasn't part of a drill. Ava Morgan stood alone on the beach at dawn, waves lapping at her ankles, uniform rolled to her knees. Behind her was the same base that once tried to squeeze her into silence. In front of her, the horizon, undefined, wide open. She wasn't the same woman who stepped onto the grinder 6 months ago. And she didn't need to be, because now she didn't have to prove anything. Her first few months with the Shadow Unit were demanding in ways no training could prepare her for. It wasn't just combat. It was diplomacy under fire, decision-making under silence, reading chaos like a second language. She learned how to lead from behind, letting stronger voices speak when it served the mission. She knew when to take the bullet and when to let someone else feel the weight of risk. But more than anything, Ava learned the rarest of military traits: empathy without compromise. She wasn't soft, but she was never cruel. And in a world that too often confused harshness with strength, Ava became something different. Unbreakable but never cold. Her team, once hesitant, grew into believers. During a jungle reconnaissance mission in Colombia, Their youngest operator, Petty Officer Drew, panicked during a live extraction. A missed step, a dropped comms pack, nearly cost them their window. No one berated him. Because Ava didn't. Instead, she pulled him aside that night under the canopy and quietly said, "I've dropped things too. I just picked them up faster the next time." It wasn't a pep talk, it was a truth. And Drew never made another field mistake again. Her growth wasn't just in tactics or tempo, it was in influence. When a policy meeting was called at the Naval Special Warfare Center to discuss the future of integrated training, Ava was invited not as a guest, but as a voice. Senior officers, who once avoided eye contact, now leaned in when she spoke. She suggested revisions to the evaluation criteria, not lowering standards, but expanding the definition of what excellence looked like. "We test how hard they can push," she said, "but we rarely test how well they can adapt. We need to reward decision-making under uncertainty, not just pain tolerance." The room went quiet. Then heads nodded. Change had never sounded so clear. But perhaps her greatest growth came in the moments no one else saw. Like when she volunteered off-record to train female candidates preparing for their first day at Buds, not as a mentor or superior, but as a sister in arms. She taught them breathing control for surf torture, how to tape their ankles, how to pace themselves on log drills. "It's not about outmuscling the log," she'd say. "It's about making the pain yours before it owns you." They listened, because she'd done it. One day, after returning from deployment, Ava walked into the chow hall and was met with a ripple of silence, not cold, but reverent. Seated across the room was a new wave of recruits. One of them, a young man with strong shoulders and sharper eyes, rose from his seat, tray still in hand, and said, "Ma'am, may I shake your hand?" She blinked. "Why?" He smiled. "Because I used to think toughness was loud. You proved it's not." She stood and took his hand. The room applauded. Even Cole, now retired, had kept in touch. He sent her a letter once, handwritten in his signature blocky script. "I used to think respect was earned in volume. You earned mine in silence. You made us all better. See?" She folded that letter and kept it in her field jacket, tucked behind her trident. Not because she needed validation, but because it reminded her change didn't require permission, just persistence. Ava wasn't just the first to break through. She was the first to hold the door open behind her. And as she rose through the ranks not just as an operator, but as a tactician, strategist, and cultural cornerstone, her growth became a blueprint. Not just for women, but for anyone ever told they weren't the type. The graduation bleachers at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado were filled again. Parents, commanders, veterans, rows of white uniforms lined the seats, polished boots tapping under the late morning sun. A new generation of SEAL candidates was about to receive their tridents. But on this day, all eyes weren't on the graduating class. They were on Lieutenant Ava Morgan, standing at attention behind the podium, invited back to deliver the first-ever keynote by a woman who had completed Buds, led in combat, and reshaped the perception of what it meant to be a Navy SEAL. She wasn't a decorated war hero. She didn't carry medals across her chest. But when she stepped onto that stage, calm, composed, no rank to hide behind, the entire base fell silent. She looked out across the sea of fresh uniforms, hardened instructors, and still watching skeptics. And she began. "I was never supposed to be standing here. Not because I wasn't strong enough, but because somewhere along the way, we convinced ourselves that strength has a shape, a volume, and a voice, and I didn't fit any of it." She paused, letting the words settle. But strength isn't loud. It's not about how much weight you carry or how hard you can hit. It's about how much doubt you can survive without letting it define you. The crowd leaned in. Ava didn't tell stories about heroic battlefield charges. Instead, she spoke about the night she almost quit when the waves were too cold, the sky too dark, and the silence too heavy. She spoke about the moment her own team looked away during Hell Week. And she spoke about how she showed up anyway, how she chose not to be angry, but to endure. How she became stronger not by being the best, but by refusing to let others define what the best meant. If you're looking to be admired, this isn't the job. If you want comfort, it's not here. But if you want to lead without needing a spotlight, if you're willing to be invisible, undervalued, and still show up, then you'll understand what it really means to be a SEAL. There was no applause, just stillness. A respectful, heavy kind. After the ceremony, recruits lined up not because they were told to, but because they needed to. Some shook her hand. Some hugged her. One simply said, "Thank you for making space." Ava didn't stay long. She walked off the platform quietly and returned to the water's edge, where it all began, where the bell still hung, where she once stood under crushing doubt and still didn't ring out. She touched the rope not to pull it, but to remind herself that every step she'd taken after not quitting had mattered. Over the next few years, Morgan Hall, the new leadership barracks named in her honor, became the home for integrated leadership simulations, testing tactical, emotional, and strategic leadership under pressure. It became mandatory for instructors to review their own biases as part of the evaluation process. Ava didn't demand those changes. She didn't shout or fight or campaign. She simply performed, consistently, quietly, relentlessly. One of the last times she returned to Coronado, she walked past a group of fresh recruits stretching for their first log PT. One turned and called out, "Ma'am, can I ask how did you know you'd make it?" She didn't stop walking, but she smiled. "I didn't. That's what made it real." Her legacy wasn't carved in granite. It was etched into every recruit who ever felt like an outsider. Every woman who dared to lace up her boots. Every man who questioned tradition and evolved because of it. In a world that still whispers what people should look like, talk like, act like. Ava Morgan became the voice no one saw coming because she wasn't trying to be heard. She was trying to change what was being listened to. And in doing so, she taught the Navy and the world something it had forgotten. Real power doesn't always walk loud. Sometimes it walks quiet, and it never walks alone again. Strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it walks alone, quietly rewriting the rules. Ava Morgan didn't set out to become a symbol. She didn't ask to carry the weight of change on her back. She simply refused to let others define her worth. Through moments of silence, suffering, and doubt, she proved that true power isn't about overpowering others. It's about showing up again and again, even when no one expects you to succeed. The lesson: if you're walking a path no one else has walked before, you don't need to scream to be heard. Just walk it so well that they can't look away. If Ava's story spoke to you, hit subscribe and tap the bell. Share it with someone who needs quiet strength today. Thanks for watching, and remember, real strength doesn't shout. It endures.